Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from irishsportsdaily.com. I am your host, Greg Flamong, and with me, as always, is Jamie Ueyama, Jamie University. It is Thursday, June 22nd, and we are going to talk about the commitment of Notre Dame safety prospect Taebron Bennie-Powell out of Lakota West in Ohio. He was a teammate of safety Ben Minnick, who is on the Notre Dame football roster as we speak. And so we are going to talk about him. We are going to talk about the hypothetical that we didn't get to last show. We meant to, but it was all recruiting podcast last show. So we're going to talk about the playoff scenarios for a 12-team playoff and whether they favor Notre Dame and where they kind of where they stand there. It's kind of a legacy conversation for Jack Swarbrick because this is a big thing that he was a part of, getting Notre Dame into the 12-team playoff when they were going to expand. And there were a lot of questions at that point of whether or not they were going to have to be in a conference. And I think with that in mind, he kind of shoehorned Notre Dame into the conversation there without having to join a conference and be a conference member. So we're going to talk about those things and then whatever comes up in the chat. So thank you everyone for tuning in. If this is your first time listening to the show, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Links to our podcast on the audio format are in the description below of this video. And so thank you everyone for tuning in. Before we get started, I should say that we are not in control when Jamie is not at home. We are not in control of the Wi-Fi strength on his end, right? And if it's a little spotty at his son's daycare, where Jamie has been recording pretty much for I don't know, the last year, most of the last year, that's where Jamie's been. If it's spotty there, then there's really nothing we can do. A lot of people were frustrated, or some, I don't want to say a lot of people, a couple of people mentioned it to us, and it's like, it's kind of out of our control, but we want to still record the shows. We want to, and so please bear with us, right? It just is what it is, right? We have kids and they're at daycare, and Jamie's been making it happen all year, so we're going to keep doing that. So thank you everyone for kind of putting up with that. We really appreciate it. And before we get started, ESQclothing.com, they are sponsoring the show. They have been sponsoring the show for the better part of a couple of months. Head over there. They are the official outfitter of Notre Dame football. Notre Dame players are wearing their clothing on the player walk. They're wearing all their stuff on the when they're going out. And they're wearing nice clothes. Marcus Freeman's always wearing ESQ clothing when he's out on recruiting trips, and whether he's doing these events for Notre Dame clubs across the country, he's wearing ESQclothing.com. The custom bamboo dress shirt has stretch, breathable, washable, machine washable, odor-resistant, wrinkle-resistant. It's a great product. It truly is, and we recommend it to everyone. So check out ESQclothing.com and upgrade your shirt game. It looks like Jamie's making a move over to his AirPods because there's something going on with the audio there. So he's when he joins us, Jamie's struggling. He's put it on. So I did notice that Xander is in the chat. He wasn't here the last couple shows. Xander wasn't here, but Notre Dame picked up a 3-star player. And so Xander has to be here to talk about it, which is funny. Xander is always unhappy about that. CFB Hertz is back on the show, Jamie.
Yeah.
First live show I've been able to make in a couple of weeks. This feels good. This feels right. Jamie, are you good with the AirPods?
I'm good. First of all, glad to have CFB Hertz in the house.
Yeah, he hasn't been around a long time.
Yeah, hasn't been around. And you know what, Xander, glad to talk about it too, because I think we should talk about safety recruiting. Just real quick, we don't need to get into Taebron Bennie-Powell. We talked about him a lot last episode, so we don't need to get into that too much.
I do want to do it because we haven't looked at his film, so I'm gonna throw up some film with him and we'll talk about it. But go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I was just gonna say though that I think for sure, like they obviously went into official visits thinking they were not gonna end up with the safeties that they ended up with. So yeah, Chris O'Leary deserves heat. He's, I don't think he deserves heat for the way things ended the last class, because he certainly had zero control over what happened with Brandon Hillman, and really he had no control over what happened with Peyton Bowen too. Like, flaky kid's gonna flake. You know what I mean? Like, that's just kind of what happened there. He, by all accounts, he did a great job, with the recruitment the whole time. It certainly wasn't any kind of relationship with him for the reason why Peyton Bowen didn't end in the class, but you got to deliver results. And then I think it's something that you've brought up, Greg, where that I think deserves to be highlighted. Notre Dame is taking 3 safeties. If Brauntae Johnson looks like he's going to commit, really high on Brauntae Johnson as an athlete. I think he's an exciting athlete, but he didn't play safety last year. He's a better receiver than he is a safety. TBP didn't play safety last year, right? Mm-hmm. I know there's reasons for that, but I know that, and they worked him out of camp, all that kind of stuff, but he's a project. You're taking a bet on a kid.
Right.
And Kennedy Urlacher, we've kind of went into the kind of thing of like, I'm not sure he's a safety. So, he thinks he's a safety. I'm sure whatever, guy's got a lot of belief in himself. That's great. But I've seen a lot of guys like him that don't end up staying at safety. So I think, it's totally fair to question Chris O'Leary and what happened at safety here. And just, I think Marcus Freeman, the personnel, to everybody in general, because this was not how they had planned it. They thought they thought they were going to get Jalen McLean on campus. They thought they were going to get, this is the kid who committed to Penn State, but
DeJuan Lane.
DeJuan Lane, right? They thought they were going to get DeJuan Lane on campus. Like, they thought all these kind of things that were going to happen, but it didn't happen, right? It didn't happen. They thought they were going to get Paul Menke. Didn't happen. They didn't close on him, right? So, and you can say there's all these other things happen, but it's like, well, they didn't. It's results. So, like I wrote in 6 Thoughts today, like, people are going to get on O'Leary for this until there's a reason not to get on him, because that's just that's how it goes. That's recruiting, right? That's the world live in terms of like, what have you done for me lately with that? Mm-hmm. And he doesn't have, even though they got a couple good ones in the last class, they lost like a couple other ones, and then the previous one, they didn't take a safety. So he doesn't have a lot enough on his track record to just say, okay, well, yeah, you got to just, he'll eventually get it. It's like, well, no, he needs to do better, right? It's a results-based business, right? So, and Freeman and the staff need to do better, right? Could we all change if like Kennedy Urlacher and TBP, we look at their and Brauntae, assuming he commits and all that, like, these guys have great senior years, and you look at it and you're like, okay, well, things can flip like that, and so you should wait for that. But that doesn't mean that people can't be critical in the meantime. People can, look at it and fairly criticize Notre Dame without going overboard. Like, I would say Xander Cruz, a little bit overboard with some of his 3-star takes or whatever, especially if he's like, they should take Malcolm Ziegler. The guy's a 3-star on every site except for one. Yeah. The only reason he's a composite 4-star is because one site really loves him. And I just could be honest, like, we talked about it. We don't need to go into it again, but like, we talked about it. The film doesn't match up. Right? The film doesn't match up. So, they got a couple safeties in the portal. Someone brought up the portal. They got a couple from this year. And guess what? If Carter ends up being a really good player for them, well, that'll play into it too, right? And that'll matter. And if Watt develops and continues to develop, and Henderson has a great year, that'll all get added into it too. But it's just, that's the nature of the business in college football. You're always being judged. You're always being evaluated on, it's what have you done for me lately? And so you just have to, you got to judge them on what's going to happen this season. You got to judge them if maybe they're going to get in on somebody else at safety, because I could easily see that happening. but it's not. You can't say. No one can paint a picture and say like, yeah, this is. I mean, man, they're playing chess and everybody else playing checkers. No, I mean they got checkmated in safety recruiting. That's just what it is.
Yeah, and to me, it's about process, right? It's not good. Like it could work out. It could, right? Bad process doesn't always lead to bad results. Okay, so it could work out for them. It absolutely could.
Yeah.
But it's just like in 22 they didn't take anybody, right? And so then and everyone's kind of looking for like fault and stuff. And like this was a big thing with like Dell, and it was a big thing with Quinn too, to some extent, but mostly Dell, where it was like it was mistakes compounded by some unlucky stuff, right? And that's where it like O'Leary is kind of in that position too, because they didn't take anyone in 22, right? Okay, so you have to hit a home run in 23. Okay.
Yeah.
Bowen doesn't work out. Hillman doesn't work out, right? That's the problem. So then now it's like you really need to do well in 24. You didn't land Minky. You didn't land Peyton Woodyard. You didn't land Duan Lane. You didn't land Jalen McClain, right? You're out of Marquise Gallegos. So it's just kind of like that's not good process. Regardless of Bennie-Powell, regardless of Brauntae and how they work out and that sort of thing. I mean, we talked about it on the last show. I don't want to get too into it, but it's just like you said, it's projects. You don't know. We haven't seen those guys. Like we're going to show tape of Bennie-Powell. It's all outside linebacker stuff. Like there's a couple clips where he's in coverage, but it's just not like you can't get a good read for it, And Notre Dame worked him out, and that's great. You want to work him out, and they have confidence there. He was recommended by the coach, who has done a very good job of recommending players. And this is all good context to understand, but at the same time, they really needed some sure things in this class, and they're not getting it. And that's a problem, and it's bad process. And you look at the position, just who's on campus, right? Antonio Carter is a transfer from Rhode Island, which I think we like him. I think you like him. I think I like him, right? And that's a good thing. But it's like you don't want to have to count on a transfer from Rhode Island to be the savior for you, right? Xavier Watts was a receiver recruit, right? Ramon Henderson was a corner recruit. DJ Brown was a corner recruit. So it's just like there's a lot of bad process that they're trying to make work right now. And some of it will and some of it won't. And that's kind of where it's like you find yourself in this position where I don't know, like you don't have a guy that can play. So
yeah. And I think it's said because when if you miss enough, then you have to chase, and it's always about. And someone mentioned in here, sorry, someone mentioned about because you have to hit a home run because you struck out a bunch of other times, right?
Yeah.
Is essentially what it is, right? And that's the problem, because you have to do that, and you need almost like, it's like, man, they could really use a Kyle Hamilton. Well, everyone could use a Kyle Hamilton, but it's like you almost need to get a guy like that because you've had too many other misses, and then all of a sudden that just puts so much pressure on guys like Adon Schuler and Ben Minich. It's like, well, they have to hit.
Yeah,
they have to hit, right?
Looks like Jamie went out there for a second.
But you're just always chasing, and you're always trying to get, catch up for what you missed. And it all, like, a little bit, and it can happen, and it's obviously happened to Notre Dame under Brian Kelly quite a bit, right? Where they were like that at certain positions. But that's something that, if there's anything that Marcus Freeman, as he's got to adjust as a head coach, it's like, that can't happen, because that's how you just get into so many situations. Then all of a sudden, that's how you can't get to become a playoff team, because you have these misses and you have these holes on your roster, and then it's like, well, everybody needs to stay healthy here or whatever. And I understand this happens everywhere, but you want to get to the point where your roster is at a point where it's like, well, if we miss, we're going to be okay because we have enough guys that we can develop and we have enough talent there. And you don't always have to move somebody just to kind of fix problems, right? So I think it's a totally fair conversation to have about Chris O'Leary, because I said you should wait until all this kind of stuff plays out. And we've seen it kind of play out now. And now, and things can change. Things can change. The senior years can change our view on some things. The how they finish recruiting it can make things change as well. But as of right now, it's not good. It's not what you want.
Yeah. Let's talk about Bennie-Powell specifically. There are things I like. I like his size. I like his build. I like the way he moves. He's a smooth player. And I like that. He's playing out of position. There are times when he's really strong against the run for a guy his size, which I like. He shows good burst. And I'll just throw up some film right now. There's a couple of clips of him where he's, in coverage and that sort of thing. Here he's going to make a nice close on the quarterback as a blitzer. And you can see, like, when he gets there, right? Like there's explosion here, right? I mean, he crushes this guy. So there's stuff there, Jamie. How do you go about projecting him? Just watching. I know you've watched him a bunch. How do you go about projecting him off of clips like this?
Well, I think you can see stuff like he was probably like 170 pounds when this happened. He's like closer to 190 now, so that's always a good thing. But I think you can see a guy like chuck a tight end, defeat a block. Like that's a pretty good thing to see, right? You want to see that kind of thing because there's a lot of safeties too. I mean, in every position, you're going to have to defeat blocks, right? So I guess that he's be a guy who have to play on the perimeter quite a bit, and you're going to have to beat, slots, tight ends, whatever, to win in the run. Important. That's always important. So you see that kind of stuff from him, and that's what you can see there. And yeah, you see the bias. I mean, this is a heck of a play right here, right? Like him just knocking that down. Like, so, and he makes some of these plays where you can see like this guy's a good ball player, right? Like he's a good football player. And I think you could compare him to some other guys, and you're like, maybe some other guys have a little bit more impressive in terms of like playing safety and stuff, but they don't make as many plays, right? Yeah. So I think that kind of stuff matters. But I mean, you just can't see enough of him in coverage here to really get a good gauge. And to me, Greg, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but it's all about, because there's so much at safety where it's about recognition, right? Recognition. And so route recognition, instincts, and reacting, whether you're deep or they're near the line of scrimmage. And there's so much that goes on with that. And the less reps you have, the harder that is to have that. Mm-hmm. So will he have that, right? Because that's one thing I thought, with Minich is he had that, right? He had that. You could see this guy was a smart football player. And I mean, we'll see Bennie-Powell whether or not he has that, because I can't, the stuff that I saw that, Matt was able to film all of them and stuff. Transitions, that kind of stuff I liked with him. It's about like playing fast and having recognition, because he's not going to be a guy who matches up man to man very often. It's about these other things and recognizing routes and seeing like an in route and knowing when to jump this or like jump that, like all that kind of stuff matters.
Yeah. And so you referenced the film that we were able to watch, like a kind of a full game of his. And it's interesting because in that film, Ben Minich is on there, right? And I'm watching him, and I'm watching Bennie-Powell, but like there are so many plays that get made where I'm not really watching Minich, but the play gets made, and it's like, oh, who is that? Oh, it's Ben Minich, right? Like Ben Minich had such like a good, and I'm really glad I got to see this film because it helped me understand a little bit more about Ben Minich. Is that like, man, he was really making like he was closing on balls. Like there were plays where there was like a corner route that he was coming from the other hash that he jumped. The quarterback thinks he can fit it in. He jumped on it. There was another one where they ran an angle route with the running back, and then the quarterback broke out, and then the running back improvised the route. Ben Minich had to chase him across the field. They throw it to him, and Ben Minich makes like a diving pass breakup, And like that's the kind of stuff that's like, okay, like he knows how to play the position. Now, is that there's a physical component to it, right? And Ben Minich has to meet that. But it's like we know he can play, right? He has those instincts. We don't see that with Bennie-Powell just because he hasn't been put in the position.
He hasn't played, right? Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like you won't even notice. There's no way that they can evaluate that in the camp. Maybe they could put him on 7-on-7. You can see a little bit, but you just don't know, right? Like you need to see games. You really need to see games where the other coaches are game planning. It's like, oh, that safety, like we can hurt him with this, right? How does the safety counter that when they feel like they can get something over on you? That's the kind of thing that you don't know. They don't know that about Brauntae either, right? So, but Brauntae is a little bit different because I think he's a better athlete than TBP is. The thing that I noticed too is like it seems like, and I don't know if it's just he happens to not be accelerating, but like on the fumble return, right? Is he cruising or is he like running as fast as he can? Because I feel like there's like you almost feel like he's about to shift gears and then he doesn't. So that's what I'm looking for. Like I want to see if he can shift that gear, because if he can, then it makes total sense to me where it's like, okay, this is a guy who can really move sideline to sideline or do, hash to sideline, that sort of thing. Right. So that's something that Notre Dame and I'm going to be looking for in his senior year and that sort of thing, and how he plays as a senior. So it's just that it's not that these are bad players, right? That's not what we're saying. Like in a vacuum, they're all fine takes. The problem is that it's not in a vacuum. There is context around it, and they're all kind of the same in that you're all projecting and you just don't know.
Yeah.
And you just want more. You want more of a sure thing there. That's all it is. It's nothing against any of these players as individuals. It's just that how do they fit into what Notre Dame's roster is, where they're going, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And it's something that I think that I've kind of concentrated on more lately too is value with players in terms of like they only have so many years of eligibility. And I know, I mean, first of all these guys, it's crazy that there's so many guys right now who are like 6-year guys, and there's so many guys who are going to have 6 years of playing or whatever, like 5 years of playing, 1 year red, that it's a little misleading because there's guys that you can take longer to develop when you got 6 years. Well, these guys aren't going to have 6 years, right?
Yeah,
so they're not going to have that. And then the other thing is that, like Notre Dame, if you're not really in the mix by year 3, like a guy who's really pushing for playing time, you're probably never going to play. Like that's just typically what it is, right? Because you're going to get over recruited. There's some other guy who's coming up there, right? So that's where you have to see. And that's super important. And make that jump and prove the coach and guys for Notre Dame that they're right and they're right with their things. Because if you can't waste a year of development, they have to have that development now, or else it's going to look like, or else because if they come in, if they were coming in right now, you'd be like, okay, like these guys are never going to play because they're just going to get recruited over. So what are they going to make? What are they going to do in this other time that they have? And that's where something like where you saw like Armel Mukum, he was at a certain level as a junior. I think there was flash there, and then you saw he took a big step as a senior. And Minich too, right? Same thing, right? So, what are these look like there? And I think that all that matters. And the one thing you can say about the staff last year in terms of where these guys do, I mean, based on some of the stuff that a lot of these guys were at, so many of them were at Cincinnati, and so many, obviously, they had a lot of guys pan out, right? So that, you take that into matter because they've evaluated people like this before. And like I mentioned, there's someone who was talking about all like the 3 stars and whatever. Only Iowa has 3 stars. Well, Cincinnati had 13 3-stars or lower. Some guys were 2s that were drafted in the last 3 years. Notre Dame, or 14, sorry, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame had 13 total. So they had more 3-stars drafted than Notre Dame had total guys picked in the last 3 years. So I think they know something about evaluation and development. So, and then the other part is look at where these guys who weren't the highest ranked last year, when they offered them and took them, and where they ended up. And a lot of those guys ended up like rising quite a bit. So are we going to look at, say, like Teddy Rizak and TBP and all these guys? How's it going to look after we see senior film and these guys kind of jump up and whatever? And even so, like sometimes they don't jump up as much as you want, but the senior film backs it up. And people are so it's important for looking at all these kind of things, like, fast guys play fast, right?
Yeah.
Track times, verified times, all that kind of stuff matters. But go back and look at some like those Baylor guys that were super fast, that had 10, 600 meters and all that kind of stuff. Go back and watch their film. These guys were good ball players too. They were really, really good. Really, really good. So there's actually a ring light here. The reason I don't use the ring is because it has a reflection on.
Oh yeah. It reflects off the glasses.
Yes, it's annoying. So that's why I don't use it.
Yeah, but thank you, Tyler, for getting him the ring light fund. Maybe we'll get started a better Wi-Fi for Jamie's daycare fund. Get them that good stuff. So I appreciate it, Tyler. Thank you very much for the super chat there. And Roderick Blackman is bringing up 3-stars a lot, and it's important to understand this isn't a 3-star problem for me. I don't care that they're 3-stars. I don't. I care that when I watch them play, I get nervous about the fit and how it's going to work out. Like I was standing for Teddy Rizak, and he's the lowest rated player in the class. To me, it's not a 3-star thing because Brauntae is a 4-star. He's like top 200 guy. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Like he's been moving around a little bit, so I haven't checked last time, but I know he's in the top 200. It's not. It's not that it's they're 3-stars. It's just that I just don't know their fits at safety. That's basically what it is. So I don't. Whatever. I like Brauntae Johnson, the player. It's just that he might not work at safety, and they need people to work at safety right now. IT 6900. Well, he said, what is this Yama versus Christian in the 40?
Oh, Mike
started
this right on ISD or whatever that me and Christian were going to run a 40 against each other or something like that. And then Christian said he'd destroy me because he raced his buddy for money. I want to say 2 or 3 years ago he did. And there's a hilarious picture of him just dusting him, and then his buddy trying to dive at the line to try to get it. But I will say, if I'd have a good 10, and then my hammy would explode at about the 12. But back in the day, I ran a 4.59 at 242 pounds. So
let's go.
Don't sleep on me. If I get some little bit of training, I drop
Kyle Hamilton speed out here.
Yeah. I don't think my flying 20 is quite as good as his, but yeah.
All right then. All right, so that's the situation there. So we'll be back talking about safeties again. We think with Brauntae Johnson. I think he's announcing tomorrow. So we'll see if that turns out well for Notre Dame, and then we can have this conversation again next week, Jamie. It'll be very, very exciting for that. All right. So let's make the transition. So Coach Humph last week, he said in the chat that I'm going to post something like a long thing about his little hypothetical scenario and whether Jack Swarbrick was a genius for getting Notre Dame into the 12-team playoff the way that they did. And everyone's really upset about the no possibility of a bye thing. And so we're going to talk about that because it is interesting, right? It's a good conversation to have. So basically, and his thing was super long. I can't read it. It was like multiple paragraphs. Thank you to him for the.
It would take the rest of the show.
It would take the rest of the show to read it.
No
so
shot
basically,
it was a long. It was a long solo.
No, but it was good because I needed to know where he was coming from. So it's good. So basically, his thing is like everyone was upset about the no bye, and his point was, and if there's anything that I'm missing, Jamie, just kind of throw it in. But his point was that because Notre Dame is the 5 seed. They don't the way the schedule works. They don't have that long break in between. They have it's like a couple of weeks. Like so, it's basically like the last game of the year, Thanksgiving, against USC or Stanford, right? And so then there's a week off that they always get, and then you go into the playoffs, or maybe there would be another week. So basically, you would have 2 weeks instead of 3 weeks rest, which is kind of like more in tune with you're not breaking schedule. You're not
it's like having a bye. Yeah.
Right. You're not having the rust, right? And that sort of thing. So you have 2 weeks off, then you play at home. And you're basically playing so you're playing a lower seed. So you're playing the lowest seed in the playoffs at that point, which everyone else is playing a conference title game. Like the top 4 seeds are playing a conference title game. Maybe the 12 seed is higher rated than those teams are playing, but probably not, right? Just generally speaking, they're going to be higher in the rankings. But even so, you're playing, and it could be a non-Power 5 school as well. I believe I have that correct, where it's like it could be the AAC champion or something like that. So you could be playing them, and then you get the next game would be against the 4 seed, and the 4 seed would normally be playing a lower ranked team. Right. So you kind of have that advantage too. It's like the 4 seed is playing what Notre Dame would be the 2, like the real 2 seed or the real 3 seed or something like that. And so that's kind of where he's coming from in terms of like it's actually an advantage for Notre Dame in that scenario. Did I get that right? I want to make sure I got that right. I'm pretty sure that was the gist of what he was saying. I think Jamie might be frozen. I do have it correct. So I do think that's right. And my thing is like, sure, right? Like, sure, maybe that's true. It's like, maybe that all kind of, I don't think that there's like a huge like value add to the way Notre Dame is structured because I just don't think the other conference commissioners would let that happen. They would not let Notre Dame get one, especially when they're already mad about the fact that they don't have. Well, okay, Coach Humph is here. So he says, yes, the 4th seed is actually worse than Notre Dame's ranking-wise, right? So this is all assuming that Notre Dame is like the number 1 seed or number 2 seed or something like that. They went undefeated in the regular season. And so it's just, I don't think that if that was a true advantage, the conference commissioners would have let Notre Dame get away with that. They're already mad that they're not in a conference and they don't have to play a conference title game. And they're all sitting there thinking about it. So it's not like, it's not like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Like, I feel like in the net, it comes out kind of as a wash. Do you have a take on that, Jamie?
Yeah, I would say that it comes out kind of more as a wash. I would say that my issue, okay, one, I would give credit to Jack Swarbrick because of how it was. Notre Dame wasn't going to get any other situation that was better than this. So I don't know if I cut out there or you cut out, but
no, I my daughter was talking to me, so
okay. so Notre Dame wasn't going to get a better situation than this because they're not playing as an independent, right? So they weren't going to get a better situation than that. This is the best thing they do. This is essentially their conference championship game, right? So that's the way to kind of look at it. I think Swarbrick did a good job in that sense. And I do see what Coach Hump is saying about, they're really going to be a higher seed than that team. But being the 2 seed, just as, the hypothetical seed and playing the 7 versus playing, you're essentially playing the 4 seed.
All right, Jamie cut out for a second. So what he's saying here is, what Jamie is saying is you would be playing if you were the real 2 seed, you would get a bye and then you would play the 7. And in this situation, you would be playing the 12 and then the real or the hypothetical 5, which is usually a pretty good team, right? Usually that's Ohio State, or usually that's Michigan, or usually that's maybe an SEC team that didn't make it, like Alabama this year, right? Like they were the 5. So like you would be playing a team like that. And so that is where it's kind of like we lost Jamie for a second. He'll be back. So that's where it gets kind of difficult because you're playing and it's kind of unknown because you get a bye, yes, but then also like they're playing a conference title game. So if it's an SEC team, like they're playing a top 4 team already, right? The Big Ten, maybe, right? Like last year, what was it? Michigan played Iowa. Like you're not playing like a great team or anything. I don't know. They played Purdue. So the last 2 years they've played Michigan, or Michigan has played Iowa, and they've played Purdue in the conference title game. Like those are not top 12 ranked teams. So they get a break. I think the ACC probably, like, it kind of comes out in a wash. So the only advantage Notre Dame would have actually in that situation, like the Pac-12, I think playing a Utah or an Oregon or something like that, I think that would work out, right? Work out to Notre Dame's benefit. Like USC would have 2 tougher matchups. Like you're probably playing like a number 5 or a number 6, and then you're playing a 7 seed. So that works out for Notre Dame. But like, it's just, to me, it's not, you do want to have that bye. Like you do want it, right? And I think there are benefits to it. So Coach Hump, the way that he's talking, and let me throw up this comment from him. One wrinkle that I think is important is that the 4 highest ranked conference champions can theoretically be a team ranked outside the true top 4 or 5 teams. Like that's true, right? They could be ranked outside the top 4 or 5 because you do need to win your conference championship, right? But so you could have a 6 seed or whoever that's like, you have to win your conference championship to be in the top 4. You could have a 6 seed that was like the number 2 or number 3 ranked team, right? Or number 4 ranked team or something like that. So I don't think there's any like straight stroke of genius that went along with this. As far as what Coach Hump or what Jack Swarbrick did, there are benefits to it, right? Like you are more game ready. You are more, you're more in rhythm. You do get that home game. You don't have to, you're not having the conference title game, which helps. You don't have the, you're not playing that tough team. You are playing the 12. You do get to play. If anything, it's tougher for the 4 seed. It's kind of tough for the 4 seed because then the 4 seed in the second game is basically playing a true 2 or 3 seed. I think the 4 seed gets kind of boned by this in this scenario. But as far as like a huge benefit to Notre Dame, I don't know that that's true. Jamie, did you pick up the gist of what I was saying there?
Yeah, and I'm about to punch through a wall here. This is getting ridiculous. My big thing and the reason why, like, I get the whole timing of it and whatever, that part of it, I would agree with Coach Hump. I just think that in a lot of years, that 4 seed, which is really the 5th seed or whatever, that ends up being Bama had a down year.
Yeah.
Georgia had a down year or whatever, right? And it's like, you might be playing the most talented team in the country. You know what I mean? Like that just kind of lost a game they shouldn't have during the year. That's not a team you want to play. Like that's
right.
like you'd much rather play the 7, you know? You'd much rather hope that somebody else knocks them off during that time. It's like you see with Saban talking about you know, when they're talking about the playoff, and it's like, well, they would be favored in against 3 of the 4 teams or whatever, right? Like when they don't make it. And that's totally true. And it's true because they have more talent than those teams. I just think, like, if you're, say, this year and you're like, do you really want to play, like, okay, you get Bryce Young and Will Anderson that in your second round game, like, you wouldn't want that.
Right.
You just wouldn't want that. So I just think from that perspective, all the timing of it, I totally get. I just think from that is the ultimate downside. And I just think it happens more than you think. Or you get Ohio State, like, lose to Michigan and you don't get it. And it's like, well, you got to play Ohio State. Like, it's going to be usually the team that is the first out of that top 4 is usually a great team. Like, you know, maybe flawed, but usually one of the most talented teams in the country. And I think you'd prefer not to play that team until you got to, like, the actual semifinals.
Yeah, and it's just like you play, because here's the other part. There's no conference title game, right? But if you're a really good team in the conference title game, that's essentially a free roll because you're still going to make the top 12. So it's like, and that game is, so it's not an elimination game. Like Notre Dame has to win 3 straight elimination games as an undefeated team. No, and you could look at it like, well, you should, because, you know, you're undefeated, right? Like you
2020 they lost the ACC championship game. You're right.
Right. And so you know, you got to win 3 straight in an elimination. Whereas another team, like another team with a bye, they only would need to win 2. You know, and that just, like, it's just a pretty big deal. And I understand that, like, the idea, it makes it, the 12-team playoff makes it easier for Notre Dame to get into the playoffs, which is great. But at the same time, the point is to win the playoffs. Notre Dame's been to the playoffs, but you want to win the playoffs. So you're making it easier to get in. You're making it harder to actually win it. I don't know if I like that trade-off, you know, but then maybe that's all they could do, right? Like maybe it's just like, that was kind of a non-starter. It's like, no, you have to play the 3 because everyone else is playing, you know, their conference title game, which I guess, you know, some teams don't play. Like Alabama didn't play in the conference title game this year. And where did they finish? 5, 6? So,
something like that.
So they don't have a conference title game. So, like, I don't, it's not like everyone has to play in a conference title game to make the playoffs. Right. You don't have to play in the conference championship to make the playoffs. That's the other part. It's like if you're making Notre Dame be a, you know, they can't have a bye because of the conference title game. Well, then no team should be able to make it if they're not in the conference title game, right? Like, are we doing that? Like, we're obviously not doing that. So it's just, I don't know. To me, you want to have less games. You want to have less games to go for it. So do you have anything else on this, Jamie, before we get to some more questions?
Yeah, I think also there's just so many injuries at that time of year that, and I get the, you know, you want to stay in rhythm and all that kind of stuff, but like, you do need the more time for guys to get healthy. And then you have to play that one extra week while the other team has one less week, or, you know, one less, you know, beating they're taking during that time, and get more injuries. Like, it's just, I don't know. From that perspective, I don't think it's worth it. I think Jack Swarbrick did what he had to do, and I think it was smart for Notre Dame to stay independent. But I don't think it's good for Notre Dame winning being independent isn't good if Notre Dame wants to actually do everything to win a national title. It's not good.
Yes, it is not. It is not good. All right, David Lowe had a question about Gerby Lambert. Okay. Any update on Gerby Lambert after him canceling his PSU visit? All I've heard is silence, getting worried about Ohio State. Do you have a thought on this, Jamie?
I mean, all you hear is silence. The guy talks to no one. So he's not a talkative guy. I don't think you are going to. He still talks to Notre Dame. I mean, he doesn't talk to the media. I mean,
right.
He's still in contact with Notre Dame. I think they're still very much in the mix for him. I think if we had heard that he stopped talking to Notre Dame, then you'd be like, well, okay, then you would start to worry. So I think you just kind of have to wait and see. It's interesting because Ohio State they kind of like Ryan Day is a BC guy, and then so was Justin Fry was a BC guy, right? Mm-hmm. And then you got BC actually in it too. So it's like there's kind of like the Massachusetts connection there that would kind of be something to think about. And I just don't know. I don't think anyone's got a good read on him. So you just don't know, right? You just don't know. And I think, I mean, I think he's a guy, even though I do think he's someone who has a ways to go. Like, he's definitely not a guy who's going to come in and be like, oh man, this guy's going to be your next Joe Alt, plug him into Joe Alt's spot. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to take a little bit more time to be at the level that Notre Dame would need him to be. But I think perception-wise, and you look at just kind of like momentum-wise, be a pretty good thing for the staff to land that guy right now. So I think that would help.
Yeah, I think too, like, just to the way I look at it, like his teammate Traore is on campus. Yeah. Boubacar Traore is on campus. I do think there's a lot to, and this is kind of the case with KVA as well. How much it plays into it, I don't know, but I think it's the case that, you get these guys from smaller schools. Gerby Lambert's a quiet guy. He's a very low-key guy. Going to a school like Ohio State, it's just not like that. It's not. There's so many people. There's so many students that they have. Like, you're in Columbus. Like, it's the whole scene just seems to point away from someone like Gerby Lambert, who is reserved and quiet and wants to just kind of go about his business. And so I just think that that lends itself to Notre Dame, right? And I don't know that that's the case for KVA's as much, but I do think that's true for Gerby Lambert. So let's see. I mean, look at if maybe he just really vibes with Joe Rudolph, and we don't know that, right? Like, maybe that's just they have a good relationship. His Boubacar Traore is on campus, right? Someone he can talk to and kind of experience things with, and that's a big deal. It just seems like if you're going to be quiet and you're going to be you're coming from a small school and you want to be unassuming and that sort of thing. Notre Dame has a great tradition with offensive linemen. Yeah. It's not like they don't. So I just think that really lends itself to Notre Dame landing him. Keith Wiegand says, what do you guys think of Ziegler setting his commitment date before his official visit to North Carolina? Good or bad for ND?
I mean, Notre Dame he's not going to go to Notre Dame. So and it depends, I guess, how you feel about him. I mean, bad for ND if you really like Malcolm Ziegler, and good if you're like, whatever. I just feel Ziegler is in that, to me, he's in the same tier as a guy like Taebron Bennie-Powell to me. Yeah. So yeah. He might look like $1 million, but he's, in terms of his development and what he needs to improve on, he's in that kind of tier. So it is what it is. Like, it's like, it totally makes sense if you were going to take Taebron Bennie-Powell, you'd be like, okay, well, we're not going to take because he's not a guy that I would say, man, you got to make room for him. I wouldn't put him in that category.
Yeah. So it's not. So for Ziegler, it's not the timing of it. I think if Notre Dame was pushing, I think he would have had committed, or we would have heard. You know, like you just would have heard.
Well, also his date is like after. It's not like he pushed it. It's like in July.
Yeah, so it's July 17th. So he set the date, but he's going to go on his visit still. So it's not like they're not. It's not like Brauntae where it's like scheduled the commitment and then canceled everything else after that, right? Like that's a little bit different.
It's pretty cut and dry.
Right, pretty cut and dry there. Coach Humps, again, referencing the playoff. Notre Dame plays no conference championship game. It evens out the same amount of games. So it's the same amount of games, but it's not the same amount of elimination games. And that's the difference. Notre Dame's playing 3 elimination games, and the teams with byes are only playing 2. That's the difference, as an undefeated team. Like that is the kind of the trade-off. It's like it's not an elimination game for number 2 Alabama to play number 3 Georgia in the conference championship game, And in that case, right, they would have to play like the loser of that conference championship game would have to win 3 games. So the loser of the game, so essentially what they're saying is because Notre Dame doesn't have a conference championship game, they're treating them as a loser of the conference title game, essentially. Which, then that goes down to schedule, that goes down to schedule then in the regular season. And we're all going to gripe about that, right? Because like the way that a lot of these teams schedule, by the way teams schedule, like I think scheduling in college football is like a straight up scandal. It absolutely,
it's so bad.
There is no uniformity in the way teams schedule, and especially conference teams. And like, look at Michigan. What's going on? Like, it's clearly just a manufacturing of we have one big game that we need to win. In the last couple of years, we've been able to win it, and so therefore shoot us into the playoffs, right? Whereas they couldn't make the playoffs because they couldn't win that one game, and that was it, right? So I just like everyone talks about like, oh, we need a playoff like other sports have, like the NFL. The NFL it's not everyone has the same schedule, but you understand like the league sets the schedules, whereas now the schools set the schedules. It's ridiculous. Like some of these. Like they never go anywhere. They're out of conference games or trash. It's just like scheduling in college football is a scandal. Like it is a scheme of one of these schemes, a Ponzi scheme or some kind of a whatever. It's not good, Jamie. I don't like it.
All right. Well, it's been bad for years and years, and I really they should have somebody like in order to make the playoff. You should have. I don't know, like a threshold that you need to hit for in terms of like number of Power 5 teams, number of these teams, like that should matter. And I think people will that the non-Power 5 teams will complain, but let's face it, look at where this is. Like it's going to be eventually it's going to be 10 in the SEC. That's just where it's going. So you might as well. I guess when it gets to that point, people are going to be forced to play. It's just unfortunate that there's going to be like in some of it. It's like if you were in Wisconsin being in the Big Ten, I think it's West, right? The Big Ten West for so many years. It's like they won 10 games. It was like beating up on Northwestern and and Iowa and Nebraska has been down forever. And like it's different if you're in the East. It's like. Well, I mean, maybe if Michigan State was in the West, they would have won 10 games a year. You know what I mean? Just based on schedule, right? So it's like this stupid thing, which is also why you got to get rid of divisions. You need to not see that happening. I don't think until it becomes like 2 or 3 super conferences or whatever, and I don't know. Just that also just seems inevitable because it's like, why are these teams even just like the Big 12? It's so stupid what the Big 12 is just like. We're just going to keep adding teams. It's like,
Yeah,
no one's going to care. No one is
Right.
going to care. Like it doesn't matter. Like huge BYU and TCU game. That's for the sickos committee, on Twitter or whatever. That's like random person is if that's a crazy game, people will watch. If not, no one gives a crap other than those fans.
Yeah. ND Nation, thank you for the super chat. Great show, guys. This goes for NIL for safety recruiting. So ND Nation contributing to the safety recruiting situation.
You are giving to the wrong people for NIL, but we appreciate it anyway.
But at the same time, like maybe not, because we move things, Jamie. We people, they listen to us and we move mountains in that way. So we use the power of the air. I think we can leave it there. Thank you everyone for tuning in. It was a good show. We had a good time. We apologize for the connectivity stuff. Out of our control. This is something that came up like 10 months ago. Remember when I had to I had to record at my parents' house because my Wi-Fi was all weird, and it was just like that's the way it goes, and so this will get resolved. It's not a big deal. And so we'll be back next week, hopefully talking about some commitments. Hopefully we can get some news pretty soon here on the apparel deal and stuff like that. If it's, I'm telling you,
with Nike.
If it's not Nike, Jamie, I might record a show. I'm not even kidding. You don't have to be on it. And I'll be here and I'll just be venting for like 20 minutes. I don't know. If it's not Nike, I'm telling you, I don't care. Like, please do it. Come on, Jack. Come on.
Just do it.
Just do it. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you next week.